This is about solar heated carbon removal, and it's a massive opportunity. So when we're talking about how to decarbonize our energy systems, most people probably think about electricity and the need to make it fossil fuel free. And this, of course, is very important. But the largest source for emissions of many industries around the world is heating. And this is especially relevant for the growing industry of carbon removal from the atmosphere. In this session, we'll talk about a very interesting solution to tackle this problem. And let's do that by having our first guest come in on the magic of Zoom from Sweden. That's Joakim Byström, who's the CEO of Absolicon. Do you know, I can't say it.
Absolicon.
Just say it for us.
Yes, Absolicon.
I can't do it. Okay, we've got it. Thank you very much. Solar Collector AB. Welcome, Joachim. Please tell us about your company and what makes this solution so special.
Yes, and first I can correct you. It's not only industry that uses a lot of heat. The whole society uses a lot of heat. So if you see at the final consumption of energy in society, it's only 20% that is electricity. 30% is transport, and 50% is heat. Basically burning fossil fuel to heat the buildings, hot water, or industrial processes. But as you said, the majority of the discussion is on electricity and transport, and very little is discussed about heat. So this is one of our missions here for Absolicon, to talk about heat and tell everyone that heat is half, and we need to address this challenge. That is why I have this heat is half badge that we try to spread around the world. And the way that Absolicon can handle this challenge with heat is by making heat directly from the sun with concentrated solar collectors. And we have actually built the world's best parabolic solar collector that follow the sun during the day and focus the light to produce 160-degree hot steam or pressurized hot water. So this is basically working as a magnifying glass, focusing on the light, all the light on this narrow black pipe that you can see in the center of the solar collector. And the whole system is protected with a hardened low iron glass that is self-cleaning. So this kind of field that you see here on the picture, it provides then steam to power a packaging machine at Birra Peroni in Bari in southern Italy, making beer. And this is what we see, that most of the food and beverage industry, they need those kind of heat generating solar thermal fields. And we work with 15 of the 25 largest multinationals in the world to discuss and introduce this technology to them. But what Absolicon sells is actually not this fantastic product that produces heat and steam. It is the robotized production line that we built together with ABB, because the need of this kind of heat solutions is so big. So once it takes off, then you need to make hundreds of thousands or millions of square meters of solar collectors in a specific area. And for that, you need a robotized mass production. So Absolicon's core competence is to build those together with ABB and Siemens, set them up around the world to produce the enormous amount of parabolic troughs that are needed to make the heat for the industry and the transport. And we are the only company in the world that has this vision and this concept for mass producing locally small parabolic troughs that can replace heat and steam in different sectors. And those sectors, we focus on food and beverage and chemistry and petrochemical and desalination and a lot of industries. But we just recently found out that this very important industry with carbon removal is also a big heat consumer. And if we look at the challenge that we have here, the IPCC say that we need to have net zero emissions by 2050. And today we are at 40 gigatons. So what we need to do is to follow the carbon law and reduce the emission by half every decade. So we go for 40 to 20 to 10 to 5. But 5 gigaton is still not zero. So just by reducing the CO2 emissions, we will never be able to make the targets. But then we have the blue line, where we actually can take CO2 from the atmosphere, find it up there, and put it back into the ground again, so that our children and grandchildren can clean out the atmosphere that we have polluted. But the problem is that this CO2 removal process is also requiring a lot of energy. And that is then where our solar collectors come in. Because this solar collector we have developed have very, very low CO2 emissions when you build them. If you would build large wind power or PV fields, you get a lot of CO2 emission just by building the fields. But our solar collectors are just glass and steel, and we just have 8 grams per kilowatt hour of energy produced. So that is our unique selling point to the carbon removal industry.
Super, indeed, Joachim. It's very interesting indeed, and you're absolutely right. The whole story of heat is so far under the radar in so many economies about the waste of heat, right? It just needs to be turned on its head. We're wasting gigawatts of energy all over the place, if not something bigger than that. We know that many companies, Joachim, are greening their electricity consumption, but what are they doing about heat? Are you seeing companies rising to this challenge of harnessing the heat?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if you look at the big multinationals like Coca-Cola or Unilever, you can see that they rapidly have reduced their CO2 emissions. But when you dig into the data and see the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, you see that all of the reduction comes from buying clean electricity instead of buying the dirty electricity from the coal power plants. So everyone that are succeeding in CO2 reduction today are doing that by buying wind and PV electricity. And basically nothing has been done to the heat yet.
Right.
So all those multinationals, it's only Heineken that had seriously started to decarbonize heat. Everyone else is still only looking at electricity.
That's super, Joachim. Let's bring on some more guests now. That puts it into context. So we've got here with us some more guests, and we would like to have a little bumper just to move on to this next segment. So, with us we now have Tom Buchanan, Strategic Partnerships Manager at Climeworks. He's coming in through the magic of Zoom from some wonderful part of the world into Baku. And then we've got Ingmar Rentzhog, who's the CEO and founder of We Do Have Time, who's here with us in the studio. And we also have Joakim, who we just met on the magic of Zoom, with us too. Tom, I'm going to address you first. For those who do not yet know what Climeworks is and what you do, can you tell us?
There we go. Sorry, just needed to unmute myself there. Good to see you, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm delighted to have found out that in spite of the fact that I'm in a terrible apartment here in Baku and my shower isn't working, that the lack of heat in my shower is actually making my trip here somewhat more sustainable. What is Climeworks? Climeworks is the world leader in carbon removal. We are most famous for our proprietary direct air capture technology that many people know as those giant machines that they've seen out in Iceland. CNBC was out a couple of months ago, and they described it perfectly for their American audience, which was giant vacuum cleaners for the sky that suck in ambient air, capture the carbon from that air on a filter. When the filter is full, the vent closes. Then we heat up the filter with some with steam to about 100 degrees. The carbon falls off the filter. We then take that carbon and that steamy carbon and inject it deep underground, like a soda stream is how they described it, where it mineralizes with the rock below and stays for tens of thousands of years.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tom. And how could what Joakim and his company are doing with solar heat solutions be relevant in this carbon removal story?
So Our aim in everything that we do is to try and make sure that the carbon removal process is as efficient and as low emission as possible. And a key part of that is ensuring that we have a cheap and low carbon supply of heat. That's got an incredibly important role, not just in the future of so many industries, but also in what we do with direct air capture. At the moment, our two biggest facilities are in Iceland, and we can use waste geothermal heat to produce the steam that we need to extract the carbon from our filters. As we expand around the world, and we've been backed by the US government to develop a facility in Louisiana, which will eventually be capable of extracting 1 million tons of carbon per year, we're going to need to find different ways of accessing the heat that we need. And what Joakim's got is a perfect example of that.
Super. Okay, Ingmar, we don't have time. Has published hard over the years, worked very hard to phase out fossil fuel subsidies, and now we're also looking very hard at how to get rid of the so-called super pollutants. From your perspective, is carbon removal a solution, and if so, why?
I think absolutely. But the way I see it, we need to focus on we need to focus on everything, but what's most important to get more time here and now is to stop emitting those short pollutants, because you don't need to remove short-lived climate gases, you just need to stop emit them. But that will not be enough, because the carbon dioxide we put up in the atmosphere right now will stay there for up to thousands of years, so we must remove it. And we can't do that without carbon removal. But it's kind of stupid to increase the carbon dioxide emission and some magically believe that we will remove them more when we increase. We will not be able to do that. So we need to reduce the emissions and remove what we have already put up there. So we need to do everything, basically. And carbon removal must work, otherwise we will only buy us time, but we will not solve the climate crisis long term. So what Climeworks are doing is maybe not what's going to help us this decade, but it will help us in the future, and if we don't start now, it will be too late.
And if we don't start now on these kinds of technologies, we need to start to bring the cost down, don't we? I mean, there needs to be some scaling to bring costs down.
I mean, carbon removal, I don't think it will be that high volume this decade, but we need to start it now in order to scale it, bring the costs down and make it work. And therefore, pioneers like Climeworks, without them, we will be nowhere on carbon removal. And not only Climeworks, there's some others there too, of course. So, but we need to crack the code for this. Carbon removal is not a magic bullet, but it's a bullet we need to use.
Joakim, what is the potential for your solution in the carbon removal industry? How does it fit in?
If we take Climeworks as an example, for them to remove 1 million tons of CO2 every year, they need a lot of energy, but that our solar collectors can provide. So to remove 1 ton of CO2 from the atmosphere, you are actually good with 1 square meter of our parabolic trough. It captures 76% of the incoming sunlight and convert it into heat. And when then heat is used in Climeworks machinery, it captures 1 ton of CO2. So for this plant that is going to remove 1 million tons of CO2, you need 1 million square meters of solar collectors. And of course, if it would take 1 million tons to produce them, that it would never pay off. But we can make this solar field as it's just glass and metal with very, very small CO2 emissions. And what we see is then at this site where they need 1 million square meters of solar collectors, we will set up a production plant that produce the solar collectors just next to where they are needed. So there are no unnecessary transports of the solar collectors. They will just be produced by the robots and put into the field. And for the production line that we have today, that we have sold to Canada and Egypt and is now delivering, that production line produces 100,000 square meters of solar collectors every year. So for this kind of plant we are talking about, that we need 1 million square meters. It's actually 10 years of production in the production line. So we would need to set up several production lines to fulfill the energy need of that kind of plant that would capture 1 million tons per year.
Okay. Let's have us all together here. We've got like 13 minutes or something to chat among ourselves. Okay, and I think this is really, you know, what are the biggest opportunities and what are the biggest hurdles in scaling this solution is the question I have in my script. I don't know which solution we're talking about, Joakim's or Tom's, but maybe both. So what are the biggest challenges, Tom, you face right now? And with the biggest opportunities as well, Tom, yeah.
I mean, I think we probably face the same problems, and most people who have similar climate solutions are facing the same problems at the moment, which is we need a lot of money, and we need a lot of money now. And getting people to act now, as opposed to acting, you know, for us in particular, when somebody says they have a 2030 net zero goal or they have a 2040 net zero goal, they often come to us and they say, so why should we be buying this now, as opposed to in 2029 or in 2039 in some cases? And fundamentally, it is because we need to scale this up, as Ingmar said, we need to bring the cost down. And we also do need to have an impact in this decade, because without various carbon removal solutions, including the one that we offer, we're going to hit a number of tipping points, and we want to slow our progress towards those. Otherwise, it will be rather disastrous.
Yes, and we have similar problems that we talk with this food and beverage industry, and they all have the targets to get to zero CO2 emissions, but they are dragging their feet to order the solar fields from us and to start the procurement process to change the working of their factories. So it's too slow and too little.
It's interesting. I mean, let's talk maybe about the EU's emission trading scheme, but I'll just share with you out of interest, we have these shows on methane, and a lot of methane comes out of coal, right? And it's just vented into the atmosphere. But in Australia, and we're going to have somebody on the show from Australia and Britain later on in the week, it's really going gangbang to actually get the investment to actually deal with these methane links from the Australian coal mines, because they put a price on carbon in Australia, which is maybe not as big as Climeworks needs, but it's still penalizing enough that the coal mining industry wants to get rid of the methane. So, you know, a price on carbon or an emissions trading scheme of the right magnitude, surely this is something that could work for both camps here, right?
What the EU has done with the new emission trading system is that in the past, the emission trading system in the EU has only been for electricity production and large industry. But the new system that was decided in 2023, it is for all the small boilers. So that new system is for heat and transport. And it is setting the starting point at 2024, and then it's cutting the emission rights by 5% every year. So if you want to be in pace with this system, you need to remove 5% of your CO2 emissions every year, because there will not be enough emission rights otherwise. And we expect the price of those emission rights to increase the natural gas price in Europe with 50%.
Tom, I mean, emissions trading schemes, could they be good for you? Could they provide some of the finance?
I think that putting a price on carbon is a fantastic idea if it is feasible. I used to do a lot of work with various UN organizations. Carbon pricing kept me up late at night on many occasions. It's an incredibly complex area, and something that will take a lot of time to get right and to get some level of consensus on. It's why now we're seeing more and more pioneering companies set internal carbon prices. And the better ones of those, Swiss Re, Microsoft, they're looking at doing, as an example, $100 a ton in this decade, and then shifting it up to $200 a ton between 2030 and 2035, and then reviewing it in 2035 and going up from there. And then they're left to consider reports like one we had earlier this year, which is what is the social cost of carbon? And there was a report in February that said it was already well above $1,100 a ton. So I think getting agreement on what that cost should be will be very, very difficult to do. So getting the private sector to act in the way those organizations have is always inspiring and hopefully encourages more action.
Ingmar.
Unfortunately, I can chip in that.
Joakim, just 1 second. Joakim, hold on just 1 second. We'll come to you. Ingmar, you wanted to say something.
Actually, I just listened, but I mean, what we need to do here is we need to scale carbon removal technology. We need to funnel the money. It will be expensive today, but if no one pays when it's expensive, it will never get cheap. Just look at solar. It was super expensive. It was a space technology. Now it's soon the cheapest energy source on the planet, and soon the most common energy source. So the same thing needs to happen with carbon removal, but it's just one thing that we need to be very aware of, and that is we need to not eat up all the energy we produce to remove the carbon. Yes, carbon removal will need to use a lot of energy, and we must make sure that it's clean energy and it's the most efficient energy. We will need electricity for everything. So if we can use solar heat for carbon removal energy use, I think that is very important.
And solar heat for so many other things, right? Heat is sort of like also at the center of this story as well, because heat is a thing that can support what Climeworks does, but also heat is at the heart of at the moment, the European economy, and people don't even talk about it that much. And I find this absolutely extraordinary, staggering. So as you say, Joakim, it's all about green energy, which of course we need, right? Electricity. But heat, nobody talks about. It's really bizarre at the level of the policymakers or at the level of the public understanding. Yeah. Sorry, Joakim, we interrupted you there, but go on.
Yes, but I wanted to say that those internal carbon prices, we have yet to see a company that uses the internal carbon price for their investment decision when it comes to changing a factory into solar turbines. For us, what we see is that they just look at what do they pay for natural gas today and how much cheaper will it be in a solar turbine. And even when we show that it's cheaper with solar turbine, they are still hesitant. So there's an enormous potential just to do the investment that is on the table that we have proposed for different industries to turn from burning fossil fuel to use solar turbine.
Coming back to you, Tom, I mean, we have followed a little bit the story of Climeworks, and you know, there are also others I know in this space now looking at devices, if I can put it that way, or systems to capture carbon. But how, we talked about a price on carbon, we talked about carbon markets that could be useful for both of you there, but is there some other way of going? Is there a kind of Elon Musk type figure out there that could just take this thing and drive down the cost, and it would just be one of a group of technologies that are there and ready to use as we need them? You know what I mean? Does it, because it's a dream shot as well in some ways, Tom.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you had looked at what companies like Climeworks are doing today, and you told scientists that we would be doing this in 10 years ago when we started doing it, they would say that sounds pretty bonkers. So that we've got to that is Elon Musky in its own part. But we have to remember that we can't rely on one single solution. Even if one came along that was highly effective, we'd still have to look at a broad portfolio. It's why at Climeworks we now develop full carbon removal portfolios for the organizations that we work with, because in order to reach the scale that we need to get to, and Joakim brought out a slide earlier that said it was about 5 gigatons a year. I have conversations that suggest it might need to be 3 times that, scary conversations that suggest it might need to be 3 times that which means that we're going to need to scale up a lot of nature-based solutions. We're going to need to scale up a lot of soil-based solutions. There are amazing things like enhanced rock weathering that need to be refined. Biochar, BECCS has a really important role to play. All of these need to be scaled up. All of these need to have their costs brought down. But also, people need to understand that it's never going to be cheap or free. Because the most effective and best things that exist never are. But cheaper, much cheaper they will all be.
Yeah. Joakim?
I would say that the key element would be cheap financing. If we could have zero interest loans for those investments, not forever, but for a few years when those investments start, to have zero interest loans, that would make a big difference. And also, I can say that the advantage of using solar thermal is that you can actually place the carbon removal unit anywhere in the world where there's a lot of sun, like in Arizona or in Sahara or in northern India, where you have fantastic solar radiation. Because what we often run into are space constrictions when you come into an area with factories. But here we can actually place the carbon removal unit where there is a lot of solar thermal heat from the sun.
Do you have Tom, do you have a very positive government attitude in Iceland to these kinds of technologies, right? I mean, I know that they've been pumping CO2 into the volcanoes, haven't they? Linked with I think their smelter, aluminium smelter. So, I mean, they've been doing a lot of kind of funky things in Iceland. And do you think they're quite receptive to new ideas? Can I put it that way?
They are funky guys in Iceland. We are a big fan of everything they're doing. I think if it wasn't for the Icelandic government, then we would not have been able to scale up to where we are now. I think that original meeting actually happened at one of the COPs quite a few years ago between our CEO and founder and the Icelandic government that led to our two facilities being there today. So yeah, good on them. I mean, it's amazing that they have this faith in the kind of technologies that can be really game changing for the future.
Yeah. And where next then? What happens after this? You're here at COP29, Tom. You'll be having meetings with people about Climeworks. So just briefly, what are you doing here?
Meeting governments, meeting with various organizations as well to talk to them about their net zero journey and where removals fit into that, helping them come up with the right strategies. We just put out a report actually last week with WBCSD, with some of our partners, as well as the likes of Danone, Majid Al Futtaim, Aul Deleuze, Cisco, about what companies can do to get involved and to help scale up the market for carbon removal today. And why that needs to happen. So I'd advise anybody to check that out, but we'll be sharing more on that over the course of this week.
And Joakim, where'd you go with your, where's next? Have you got another country you're going to put this stuff into?
Well, we are working with those largest food and beverage industries in the world and giving them quotes for different plants. Yeah. And then we are doing offers for companies like Climeworks and other sectors that need very low CO2 emission heat.
Right. So that's the way to go at the moment. Yeah. Super. Well, look, we could always talk for a long time about this. Lots more things to say, but we're running out of time. I want to thank Ingmar for being with us, listening in. He always finds these very interesting and often has some good... Oh, you want to say something? Okay. I knew Ingmar would say something if I turned to him.
I think it's always this discussion about, but if we focus on carbon removal, we will stop doing reducing the emission. Yeah. If we focus on methane, we are going to stop focusing on carbon dioxide. There's one thing we must focus on, and that's the only thing we must focus on, and that's the time frame and the tipping points. And we will need carbon removal, we will need methane reduction, and we will need nature-based solutions, but we will need to fund those solutions that will scale at the fastest pace. And we also need to fix the heat. It's stupid that we use electricity for heating. So we need to scale all those solutions. It's not either or, it's doing everything, but focus on the time frame. We can't focus on everything, but if we focus on time and efficiency, we will solve the climate crisis.
Okay, so we need short-term, medium-term, and long-term vision in everything we do in terms of planning for this climate-changed future. Yeah. Okay, bye everybody. Been great to see you, and I'm sure we'll see you all again. And Tom, next time, if you're at the COP, come into the studio and do this, and not in some apartment where you can't get the shower working. Okay. Bye.